How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Reel Nothern Bass. Today we're going to cover cold water bass fishing locations. Last week we covered all of my go-to baits I have the most confidence in when it comes to that ice out into early spring fishing. But the baits are only as good as locations you're going to go throw them in. It's kind of a 1-2 punch, and I didn't want to overload one video. So what we're going to do is we're going to bust out not only a bunch of depth charts, but we're also going to look at Google Earth, because I can show you what a body of water looks like both in the early spring and then in the summer, so you can see that difference in vegetation. That matters for a lot of some of our best choices that would like to go target for that ice out into early spring season, and we have some of our best luck. So without further ado, let's get into the maps. All right, let's start with the lake depth chart first. Now, when it comes to ice out bass fishing, we find ourselves more often than not focusing on smaller bodies of water. There's a reason for that. Smaller bodies of water are going to ice out a lot faster. They're going to warm up a lot faster. The fishing is going to get a lot better, a lot quicker. And more often than not, I find it to be a little bit more consistent than trying to find a good, consistent bite up on a bigger, deeper body of water. This is a pretty good example. It's Lake Menominee down on the New Hampshire and Mass border. I used to fish this a lot. I haven't fished it in a while. But when we are talking about this time of the year, it's important to remember where you live. Most of you guys that are watching this are probably in the north. We're in the northern hemisphere and we are very far north. The northern end of the lake is going to warm up faster and ice out faster than the southern end of the lake. Without looking about anything else, just looking at it for what it is, I'm always going to start up here. I'm going to look for both areas that have sharp contours coming out of deeper wintering holes that are also adjacent to bigger flats, and not just any flats, but flats that offer several stages of consistent depths. Right here in the middle is about one of the most obvious spots. This point right here where you have a 21-foot hole, there's a couple of humps in the middle, there's another 21-foot hole further to the right or to the east in this case. And they're going to make easy transitions either over to here on the right, on the eastern side, or where I really like to look is a place like this over here on the left. Because not only do I have a lot of sharp contours, but this also provides several dwell areas depending upon what the weather's doing. If we have a rapid warm-up, these fish are going to come out of this 20-foot hole, and they're going to move up fast on these steep rocky banks because those rocks are going to grab the sun, they're going to warm up fast, they're going to warm up the water around them. So all the bait fish like to gravitate towards that, and then the bass will end up following them. But not too far to the west, just over here to the left, you have another good flat that offers large, wide dwell areas in a bunch of different depth ranges. That's important. They don't always necessarily want to hit these sharp contours. Sometimes when they find their happy range, whatever that water temp is at that specific depth, that's where you're going to find them holding up. And that could be in this 10 to 5 foot depth, or they could be up here in this 2 to 5 foot depth. It varies, and that's where time on the water is going to be your best friend. You just have to go out there and figure it out. But this exact area, everything here from this point near the 21-foot hole all the way over to this far western shore, are areas that I like to coin as my highest probability of success because it offers a lot in one good area. Now, the other thing about this, not too far from that, again, you have these other big areas. If you wanted to look at this northern section, you have the deepest wintering holes over here, your 21-foot, your 20-foot, another 20-foot. You've got some shallower, but not really that much of a difference area in the middle. And you have very, very large areas that are up here that offer massive dwell areas in those ranges. That's another area to look at, especially when you are considering the weather and how much things have warmed up. If you are now, by the time you can either get out, for whatever reason, whether it's Mother Nature or your own schedule, maybe you're 2 weeks after ice out, and it's been gloriously beautiful out. These bigger areas of shallow water might prove a lot better because there's so much more of it than, say, back down here, where, yeah, there's still large dwell areas in those same depths, but it's not as expansive as these areas. So purely looking at this lake from a depth chart perspective, that's the way I would break it down. No, those aren't the only spots. As the lake continues to ice out, fish are going to move around. They're not all going to stack up in this one top area. They're going to move down, and they're going to be everywhere in this lake. So if that's a good area, then I'm going to start to look for other areas that might offer the same thing. If we come down in this skinny section, same deal. You've got really, really good wintering holes here. You've got good swim lanes where they can move around at least a little bit during the winter as they go through this deeper water. But as it warms up, this is also a high probability area because it's got a little bit of everything. I know there's vegetation over here in this 3-foot area, in this little kind of mini cove off the peninsula. There's good vegetation back here. So there's a lot of cover for bait fish as they want to move up. and they can do it in a very short period of time. Understand that these are apex predators, right? They want to conserve their strength while still also trying to maximize the energy that they're going to consume, be it bait fish, crawfish, whatever. So if they can find this little nice 14-foot hole, and there's plenty of bait around where they, in a 50-foot swim, can go from the deepest spot in this large area up to a large dwell area of shallow water here, this is another good point, especially when you come into this area. Nice deep hole, really, really steep contours all around it, provides plenty of areas for them to ambush, especially in this section where you have a nice big flat separating this deep 15-foot hole to the south from this 13 to 15-foot hole just north of that. And again, you have these large, shallow dwell areas. So this is another good area where they can ambush from either side, especially depending upon what the wind is doing, driving either warmer water from the northern end down or colder water from the southern end up. The bait fish are going to be impacted by that, and the bass are just going to follow them. So as far as an average size body of water goes, this is a really good way to look at this. Now, if you're like me and you really like to do your research, you're going to have this 1-2 punch of having Google Earth Pro on your desktop, on your computer. Because the benefit of this is that you can go to different points in time for when they took satellite imagery. And you can help make those decisions if you like to specifically target vegetation. So in this case, as we're looking at Menominee on the very northern end here, up in this top left corner, there are different time periods that you can look at for when they took satellite imagery. We are lucky that they did this in April. So we've got this very early in the year where there's no really good, strong vegetation growth yet. And with one click forward, we can go to August. And now we can start to see, obviously everything's very green, all the vegetation is grown. So any vegetation that's gonna be in that lake has pretty much reached its peak at this point. So you can kind of make better decisions, especially if you wanna fish around lily pad beds. The southern end would be an even better example. If you wanted to come out of some of these deeper wintering holes and try and find where the fish are going to move up on one of my favorite areas is places that have really, really good lily pad patches in the summer. Because those just don't disappear over the winter, they just tend to lie down. All those lily pad reeds are laying down provide a lot of cover for the bait fish to hide in, especially as that water gets warmer. So I know that there's some slightly deeper water over in this area. And if you really come back over here, there's also more deep water over here. If we look in this area, you can see that there is some clear lanes here from people driving their boats through. So whether or not it's really deep, you would have to go in there to find out. But even having an extra foot of depth through here, creating better swim lanes, also provides much better ambush points for the bass. And how do we know if this is even going to be good if we're looking at this? Well, this is where Google Earth Pro comes in handy, because now we can go back to April and you can see just how much these lily pads grow over the winter when they all completely die off to when we come back here into the summer, and now everything's fully emerged and they've grown to the maximum growth potential. Same here if you wanted to come and find something maybe a little bit more subtle. We go into this way back cove. There's a little vegetation here off this dock. There's some here on this point. You can see that's not there in the spring. So there's some really good isolated lily pad patches back here. It's little things like that that I like to look for, because I know as we get out of that really cold water and the fish are on the move, you no longer can find them in that deeper water. It's things like this that matter, because I know that these are some of the key areas that they're going to start sliding up into. You've got more examples up here where, again, in the summer, you've got some good isolated lily pad patches here on this left point where we come back and clearly they're not there, but now we know that this is an area where there's probably some good reeds from lily pads to look into. It's just one of many different ways that you could potentially tackle a lake like this and early ice out. First thing though, always without a shadow of a doubt, I'm going to go into this deep water area, especially if it's immediately after ice out, and I'm going to check those deep holes. And then I'm going to check these steeper contours that we saw here around this point. And, you know, if I'm still not seeing the fish there, I'm going to bounce around the lake and check a couple more spots that offer those same deals, because those steep contours tend to be the most consistent. But now as we're into week 2, 3, and 4 after ice out, now I'm looking up here in these dwell areas again. I'm looking up here in these dwell areas. I'm coming back here and I'm looking at these transition points from this deeper water right up here where these fish are going to move up shallow and try and sun themselves over the top of all these lily pad beds. So for a mid-sized lake, average depth, this is the way that we're going to tackle it, and it's been very, very successful, very consistently successful for us. Now, continuing along that same thought as to kind of looking at smaller bodies of water, let's look at something that doesn't offer a ton of different depth like Menominee did for a first example. This is kind of a nondescript area, as you can see, kind of just a big bowl. There's an island in the middle. You can see there's a nice clean rock pile on the north end of it. But other than that, what makes this spot a little bit different and unique is it's very consistent in depth pretty much throughout the whole area. What do you do in a body of water immediately after ice out in a place like this that has really, really consistent depth? What I find very successful in places like this is I have to find the structure. I have to find something that stands out because these fish cannot go and find the deeper water that they want to. Now, when you're in the dead of winter, these fish are going to be like somewhere out in here, probably more often than not. They're going to be roaming in the deepest areas they can find where they have stable water temperatures. The moment we get into that point where I would call ice out, these fish are going to start moving back to these main lake points a lot faster than you might think. This is where hard structure of any kind, whether it's rocks or logs or vegetation, are going to be my best friends. I am going to go to a place like this and I'm going to focus in this choke point here between the left side of the island and this point on the left. I'm going to work all around this contour area in the middle and I'm going to circle the whole thing. I'm going to look around the rocks. But because, again, we're in the northern hemisphere and the sun is towards our southern horizon, the southern end of this island is going to be probably warmer than the northern end, even though it's on the northern side of the lake that would typically be warmer. But it's a smaller body of water. So everything over here, especially if the trees are pretty high, it's not going to get as much sunlight up in this area as this is. This whole bottom section of this island is going to be completely sun-drenched. If there's anything down here, especially boulders, if there's any timber hanging off, that's just going to soak up all that UV and it's going to warm up a lot faster than, say, if there's a really good rock pile in this spot. Yeah, it's closer to the northern end, but again, it's not getting that sunlight and that matters. As we go 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks past ice out, then you're going to start seeing them move towards some of the best ambush points you can find. So this particular choke point right here, which is the gateway into this large, expansive, shallow flat. That's going to be a key area where these fish are going to start to move in because they're going to have the most opportunity they can possibly have to be able to ambush from all these points. And this is a spot that you don't necessarily need Google Earth for because, again, there's not a whole lot going on here. So, you can see like 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet pretty much everywhere. But then you've got this big shallow flat. You can look at Google Earth, but for the most part, I just know that eventually they're going to move back into this far western area, and I'm going to follow them as the water temps come up. So for a smaller body of water that's consistent in its depth, that's how I'm going to look for it for, again, what I'm going to consider my highest areas of probability for success. Down on this end, same deal. Like, this could be a much better spot because you got a 12-foot hole, so it's a little bit deeper than everything else. Nice sharp contours. It's toward the southern end on the southern point on the northern end of the lake. So this is where it's going to get a lot of sun in this area. You can find some good grass, whatever left over that survived the winter. You got some rocks, any timber you can find. Like, this whole area is going to be a good spot that I would look into. Down in this area, probably one of the last spots I'm going to look at because it's on the southern end, so it's not getting as much sun. And there's just not a whole lot of crazy good contours. Like, yeah, you've got some 8 foot here and it comes up. But if there's nothing really here to hold these fish, and more importantly, allow the bait fish to hide as they get into the warmer water, then I'm not really going to look in this area. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to try and find structure. And that's how I'm going to pick my best places to fish for that ice out fishing. Last but not least, let's cover some of the bigger bodies of water for those that live in an area where maybe that's your only choice, or maybe that's just what you prefer, especially if you just want to go out for smallmouth and you know of a spot that really only has them. Newfound Lake in the Lakes region of New Hampshire is a great example. It's one of my favorite glacial lakes to fish. A lot of really good smallmouth in here, so we're going to give this a little bit of a go. This becomes a lot more challenging as, now we're talking over 4,000 acres of surface area to break down. So how do you go about trying to condense such a big body of water, in this case where it has a lot of really, really deep water, and eliminate all the areas that aren't likely to be productive? Find your areas where you have the highest probability of success. In this case, I'm really not doing this any differently than what I talked about with that first lake. I am looking for steep mainland points immediately after ice out, and I'm primarily going to start up in the northern end. Now, the added benefit or challenge, however you want to look at this, for a body of water like this, now you really have to understand what the forage is in this. In this case, on Newfound, I know it's very heavy with smelt and yellow perch. Now, if you know anything about your bait fish, the forage, what they do, especially at what time of the year, you would know that smelt are very happy in cold water and they tend to spawn kind of in the middle of winter coming into early spring, and they like current. They're going to get up into streams or anything like that they can get to, and they're going to be close up to it. So in this case, looking at the northern end, we have an inlet. It's kind of hard to see in this, but I can promise you there is water flow coming out of there. And as luck would have it, not only is there a lot of deep water, which we can see right here, it's almost 100 feet deep, but we have a lot of sharp, steep contours coming up to mainland points. So this is an area I'm going to look at. I'm going to look all around this. I might come down here a little bit, but my primary focus is going to be up here. Northern end, it's getting the most amount of sun. It's got these big shallow flats. So for the yellow perch especially, because they like to spawn in the spring, they're going to want to start gravitating this way as they look for their own spawn flats. And in this area, I'm going to look for structure as well. We come around, same deal over here. These fish are coming out of their winter haunts. They might dwell in a hump like this. They're more likely to move up to these main lake points. But as we have those shifts in weather, you know, a spot like this provides a little bit of everything for them, where they can slide up to this marker buoy here that's identifying a rock pile or just a shallow area in general. But if we have a really crazy bad cold front that's sustained for several days, they can slide back out here to this deeper water, which also provides a large dwell area, which tends to be a really good holding spot at that depth, that 35 to, we'll say, 45 foot mark. And then they even have a little offshore structure spot here if they decide, you know what, we're going to stay out here, we're going to hang for a little bit. But then it's an easy swim for them to come back up to these shallow spots. As we continue to kind of look at that same deal, we have areas like this, northern end. Now there's no inlet, so the idea of smelt are out of the way, but not all the fish are up there going to be chasing the smelt in the few spots they're going to be. There's not enough room for them to all do that. And they're opportunistic hunters, so they're going to spread themselves out. So here's another area. You come out of some of the deepest parts of the lake, 120 feet there, 114 feet down here. You've got a hump where they could be holding in the winter. In a short swim over here to the east, you've got really, really sharp contours coming up to these shallower dwell areas that are still moderately deep. You've got a 20-foot dwell, another 20-foot dwell. You've got some dwells in the 40s and the 30s. These are the kind of areas that are my starting points. It sounds a lot easier than it is, and some days it definitely is going to be very, very challenging. But these are the kind of areas that I'm going to look for, and I find success. You might have to bounce through 5 different spots, like this in particular. If this is the kind of spot that they're on, it might take you looking at 5 of these before you finally find them. And that's the challenge that we find when we're talking about ice out bass fishing on these bigger bodies of water. But to use that as your general guideline, it's really hard to go wrong with any of that. One final parting thought that I think is still really important to mention with this. But before I do that, if you could do me a favor, if you found this very, very helpful, you enjoyed this and some of the other videos we've done, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And beyond that, do me a favor, leave a like on the video. It helps immensely for us just to be able to grow and for it to be able to be pushed to other people. And then beyond that, if you have any other questions or you just want to leave a comment in general, leaving a comment on the video is also very helpful. So if you want to do that, again, any questions, I check it daily. I get to everything, and I would greatly appreciate that. But the most important final parting thought that I would have regarding locations is I can sit here and tell you all this from a bunch of different lakes that we've already fished. We've already had good success with it. And a lot of that does translate out there. But until you go out and put the time in to really understand what you're fishing, fished it at least once or twice. I mean, if you have all the electronics, it's going to make it a lot easier to understand and see what it is you're fishing. If you don't have a lot, you can still do it. It might just take you another trip or two. I don't want you to get discouraged. Ice out fishing is not the easiest thing in the world. But I can promise you that if you put the time in on the water, because that is by far the most important thing any angler can do to get better and to learn. Put in time on the water, get out there, do your best, have an open mind and be patient. Between this, covering locations, and covering all the baits we did in the previous video, I promise you, you're going to have a really, really good spring. And if not, you can take that into the tail end of the season when the water temperature is starting to come back down again as well. Thank you very much for watching. Again, I hope you found this helpful. We'll catch you guys in the next one.